This is Infants on Thrones. The philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the Core.
Welcome back to another episode of Infants on Thrones. My name is Tom Perry. And this is part 2 of a 2-part series on forgiveness. Part 1 was a panel discussion that myself, Glenn, Matt, Bob, and Scott had about 4 years ago. For this particular episode, we took that same panel and we revisited the topic on forgiveness. The first clip that I'll play is us reflecting back on that previous panel discussion that wasn't released, but now is. And then right after that, we'll jump right into talking about forgiveness in 2017. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
But I definitely want, I mean, whether it's on the record or off, I definitely want to hear Bob's thoughts of listening back to that early episode, because I read your email and I was like, sounded like you had some nostalgia or something like that.
Yeah,
like, I remember that.
Really,
those are pretty
I really
good
liked it. I thought it held up pretty well. I was expecting a lot worse because I thought in one of the just because in one of the emails Tom said something like, "Oh, it's kind of dated." And
it is dated.
Oh, we must have sounded like we didn't know how to podcast. But I felt
was he making references to like a different Spider-Man movie or something embarrassing like that?
Like whatever came before Lost,
yeah,
Sopranos or something
before.
Well, it was dated because
Lost only would have been 8 years old at that point.
Because Scott was still using an alias. Yeah.
Well,
that'll do it.
That was hilarious.
But I think it was fine.
Flipping in and calling him Scott one time, that cracked me up.
That was good. But I just want to say, Tom, you should use as much as you want from that, because I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I also was pretty. I almost want to use the word proud, but that sounds like arrogant. But I'm pretty happy with how I sounded back then. I kind of agreed with myself. I was like patting myself on the back, like, yeah,
dude, I was awesome back then, and I'm still awesome now.
Don't you love that? Don't you love that when you listen back to a podcast that you were on, and like the conversation's going along, and then you're like, oh, but I need to make this point.
And
then you do.
Yeah.
Oh, man,
right. Deja vu.
It's one of those things where I go, yeah, I feel like I've really evolved since in the last 5 years. And then I'm thinking I should make this point because I didn't think that way back then. And then boom, I made that point. And I'm like, oh, I really haven't changed as much.
It's the same brain rattling around up there.
Well, I was going to say that was the other scary thing was now that I listened to it, this third time I consciously didn't say any of the same stuff anymore.
You're keeping that in check.
Time I repeated myself without even realizing it. Like 50% of what I said, I'm like, holy shit.
No, I was aware of it. I was going to point it out, but I thought, oh, you don't even know, so it didn't. Yeah,
that was kind of weird. It's almost eerie. Like I'm not that original. Like ask me something about any topic and record me, and then you'll be like, I have a recording from years ago, and you're like saying 75% the same shit. I'm a robot.
None of us have that many original thoughts.
Thank you, Matt.
But I agree with what you're saying, Bob, about that recording. I think it is good enough to be published now as well. I mean, there are a few parts at the beginning and
at the end,
part at the end that we would need to clip.
Yeah, we would.
The rest of that stuff in the middle, I think
it's great. Yeah,
it is good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so do you think Matt's going to join?
I doubt it. They're driving to Oceanside right now,
right?
So
you probably wouldn't have
let's
very
just
good reception. Even
proceed without him, and if he calls in, maybe.
Okay, yeah. Is it okay?
I'd like to turn the time over to Tom Perry.
Tom, I'm telling you, just splice in Matt as if he's part of the conversation.
Yeah,
it's just 5-year-old.
I think each one.
He's talking about the previous audio.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Matt from 5 years ago.
That wasn't meant as a Matt slam. It just came out wrong. He sounds like a 5-year-old.
Well, okay. I know that we can try to rehash a lot of it. From the last discussion that didn't get recorded, but I do want to start off by at least really nailing down the definition Because it seemed like some of you guys just kept saying, well, I don't even know what this means. I don't even know how to define it. And I think we should just get that out of the way right off the bat, if that's all right. Because as I was reading some of the definitions, there was only one that I was like, okay, there you go. That's where I get it from. Some of them are this wishy-washy, like, oh, just move on bullshit. But I'll tell you in a second. All right. From Wikipedia, it says, forgiveness is the intentional and voluntary process by which a victim undergoes a change in feelings and attitude regarding an offense. Lets go of negative emotions such as vengefulness with an increased ability to wish the offender well. Anyone subscribe to that definition?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds right to
Wait,
me.
but only sort of, right? Because the key word there is voluntary. And is it really voluntary if you need the offender to apologize and you have all these...
Was that the key word?
disclaimers?
Well, it said
voluntary was the key word in that?
No, it said forgiveness...
According to Bob, sorry.
It is the intentional and voluntary process. So, yeah, both.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that the sticking point is how much is required of the other person before you're willing to forgive. And by putting the word voluntary in there, Wikipedia is saying not much. But I think for a lot of us, there is some requirement more than that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, this one...
But even if you have that from somebody else, it's still voluntary. Like, what is voluntary? Bob, look up voluntary, or Tom, look up voluntary. Let's define voluntary.
I think what Bob's saying is that it's necessary, but it's not sufficient, right? Like, if you
or that it's independent of someone else asking for an apology, that voluntary somehow suggests that it's independent of that.
Right. What you're saying, Glenn, what I'm trying to say is that it still leaves room for two very different definitions, even if we all say, oh, that sounds pretty good. You know, we can all walk away thinking, one set of us thinking the other person's not involved, and another set of us thinking, oh yeah, I need a sincere apology before anything happens.
How bad is this?
Hey, we got Matt.
Hey, is that Matt?
It's okay.
Hey,
It sounds like your phone, but
it says the recording that the meeting is being recorded, so we're already way ahead of last time.
yeah. We've all been double checking on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt so bad for you, Glenn, but now that I hope you're over it, I want you to feel
bad for me.
again.
I felt bad for Tom.
You should feel bad for me.
Why, Scott? Why?
I don't know.
Just first.
I just wanted some empathy.
Yeah.
I want my own pity party.
Scott.
All right. Can I continue reading then?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. This is continuing in Wikipedia. As a psychological concept and virtue, the benefits of forgiveness have been explored in religious thought, the social sciences, and medicine. Forgiveness may be considered simply in terms of the person who forgives, including forgiving themselves, in terms of the person forgiven, or in terms of the relationship between the forgiver and the person forgiven. In most contexts, forgiveness is granted without any exception or restorative justice, and without any response on the part of the offender. For example, one may forgive a person who is incommunicado or dead. In practical terms, it may be necessary for the offender to offer some form of acknowledgement, an apology, or even just ask for forgiveness in order for the wrong person to believe himself able to forgive. All right, and anyone that agrees or disagrees with that definition?
I think that sounds about right.
I harmonize with that one, and that one goes to what you were saying earlier, Glenn, that it includes the person who wronged a little bit more.
If I were reading that on Wikipedia, I would have no suggested edits.
Very nice. All right.
Kind of like I felt when I walked out of Spider-Man today.
It's just like that.
Unlike Bob.
It's just like that.
I always have suggested edits.
I had no suggested edits.
Most world religions include teachings on the nature of forgiveness, and many of these teachings provide an underlying basis for many varying modern-day traditions and practices of forgiveness. Some religious doctrines or philosophies place greater emphasis on the need for humans to find some sort of divine forgiveness for their own shortcomings. Others place greater emphasis on the need for humans to practice forgiveness of one another, yet others make little or no distinction between human and divine forgiveness. Well, all right. I don't know why I read that part of it, because it's pretty heavy. Pretty heavy on the religious stuff.
On the divine part.
But there is, I mean, we talked about this last time, that there is very strong religious context to forgiveness. It's for a lot of religions, there is a very strong component to forgiveness in their doctrine, right? Would you guys agree? Oh, Matt dropped off. Scott dropped off.
Forgiveness is an important part of social cohesion in human social interaction.
But
and that's what religion kind of codifies.
But isn't
and it's codified over years?
I took it a different way. I think religion takes forgiveness and makes it a very personal thing, because I mean, you all of a sudden have to start forgiving yourself for stupid, arbitrary shit that you wouldn't otherwise. So it's like not as much to do with society or rectifying things with people, but if you have to forgive yourself every time you masturbate, that's probably more forgiveness than the rest of your forgiveness combined, for example.
But isn't that kind of like guilt more than forgiveness? Like, I don't know. I thought we were trying to zone in on the interpersonal kind of forgiveness.
Yeah, I mean,
to me it seems sort of like a different.
But we were talking about
the same word.
We were talking about the religious tie-ins to it,
right?
So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. I mean, isn't Jesus essentially like a center figure for forgiveness? I mean, at least in Mormonism, he is, right? He bled from every pore.
I think in the New Testament too. I mean, things portrayed as extremely forgiving, and that's a big part of Christianity, is being able to, turn the other cheek and all that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know.
I sense that Matt has a comment.
Are you there, Matt?
Yeah, I'm back. It should be good for a while.
Okay.
I didn't hear anything till just now. I just came on.
I thought you were on mute, and then you were just gonna like unmute when you had a comment.
That's funny.
I will do that now.
Okay.
So, Tom, the reason I made my snarky comment was because when it comes to religion, what does religion facilitate of the Wikipedia definition of forgiveness that you can't get without religion? You know, restitution, feeling bad, whether or not it's independent, reconciling with the other person. Even Jesus stuff is good, but like you can figure that all out in a religious, without religion. But where religion really co-opts forgiveness and makes it a whole new level of religiousness is when it's involving yourself and sinning and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, but they also tie in that there's a greater, like, divine something or other out there that, I don't know.
God is always watching.
Right,
yeah.
but it also is, like, the key or the one person who can actually give forgiveness, I guess, in some cases. I guess Mormonism gets a little sticky, right? Where it's like you still have to confess to your leader, your bishop or whoever, and even though it's Jesus or God that forgives you, there's like these mediaries that you have to go through in order to actually achieve the full repentance.
Right.
And then, of course, if you screw up again, then all that stuff gets tacked back on like you never went through the repentance process to begin with. But
right. I mean, it's no coincidence that the Mormon book, The Miracle of Forgiveness, is mostly about masturbation, right?
Is it? I know there's a lot in there, but I don't know.
No, there's a lot of racist stuff in there too. It's not all bad.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not all bad because of the good racist stuff that's in there.
It was a joke.
Yeah.
Because it's all bad. Because it's really all bad.
All right, and then the dictionary. So that's moving away from Wikipedia, and this is my favorite. I'm already playing out which actual definition I agree with. It says to grant or pardon for or remission of an offense, debt, or whatever, and or to absolve. There we go. That's the definition that I don't know if it's something that I like internalized on purpose or what, or whether it's culturally or what, but I've always felt like that word absolve. Mm-hmm. Clean slate.
But again, like what does absolve mean? Because
clean slate.
Where we've been getting stuck on forgiveness is the forgive and forget part of it. Right? That
yes and no. We all
So
agree.
if
We
you're
all agree you don't
absolving
forget.
somebody of an offense that they've done. Does that mean that you forget it? I mean, does the absolution of it mean that it like never happened?
You should
or
be
just that you're not letting that be an impediment to continuing a relationship with that person?
Well, I think we all agree that you can't, like actually forget. But if you're going to absolve someone, then you work at ignoring that part of it. Like you can acknowledge that it happened, but you don't let that like be something that hangs over them or you. It's like there, but only peripherally. Does that make sense?
So like when your wife brings up things that you did 3 years ago as a way of saying,
were you there? Did you hear this
kind
conversation?
Does that mean that she has not forgiven you?
Yeah,
Yes.
that is what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll remember that. I'll
Yeah.
use that next time I'm in that situation. That
Yeah.
will work really well.
She'll really
Tom-
appreciate it. Yeah.
Tom and Wikipedia said, yeah, that'll be good in the moment.
Those are your sources, yes.
Yeah, that'll work.
So does anyone else agree with the absolve definition?
I kind of don't.
Okay.
Yeah. So no.
Good answer. Anyone else?
I like the absolve. I like the absolved one
All right.
because that makes me think of the concept of grace, and which always is more of a religious context. But I wonder if we can't adopt that more in a secular context, especially amongst relationships. And because I keep thinking about the forgive, forget. What does that mean, and how do we do that? But at some point, can't we just have a form of grace for another person and say, maybe there doesn't have to be restitution, and we don't have to balance the ledgers like we talked about last time in that wonderful recording nobody will hear. So that's what kept coming to my mind is recently after we stopped talking, it really started triggering these thoughts of sometimes we do have to give grace to another person and just overlook those things. So absolving to me, I think works.
But I don't think it erases any form of resolution even on the offender's part. I think if it's for this is the way I look at the definition, to properly absolve completely, it does require the offender to either have some sort of sincere apology or remorse or something.
And this is where I don't know when you want to get into the examples of some of the specifics that you're talking about, but I think that's really hard to do in certain situations, and maybe that's fine. Maybe that just means there's situations where it's never really possible to forgive someone.
Yeah, well, like
But
if they pass on
But
or
like
something, yeah.
Lance Armstrong, like you're saying, in order for him to be absolved, in your mind, he would have to give some sort of a sincere apology.
That's right.
I don't know that I could ever say anything he's going to do is going to be
Sufficient.
sincere in the sense of like he really feels bad about it and that's why this is going on. Like the guy was on top of the world and lying through his teeth, and then when he gets caught, it's a pretty easy thing to suddenly feel so remorseful about when your entire world has come crashing down on you.
So
you
are
have
you-
no reason to defend it anymore?
Okay, so you're saying-
I question.
Okay, go ahead.
I question whether, as a forgive, or I could ever think that that Lance Armstrong sincerely felt bad about it. I'm sure he feels like shit about it. I'm sure he feels horrible about it. But like sincerely, I really wish that I should have never done that. That takes a complete change in character.
So let me see if I get what you're saying.
All right. Wait a minute, real quick. Can I get in on this Lance Armstrong thing?
Yeah.
It might rule the day, but yeah, go ahead.
Because the timing of our conversation about Lance Armstrong couldn't have been better.
This is true.
Can I just say I hate him?
Oh, come on! You didn't say that last time. What changed?
With white heat, and the reason why is after that conversation, I was really I was more aligned with Scott, but then a movie came out, or a little special on HBO.
man.
Oh yeah,
Word
I saw
Farm.
that.
Did you see that, Bob?
I
Yeah,
saw
the
it.
teaser. Yeah.
Okay. Don't want to give a spoiler alert, but or don't want to give out spoilers, but Lance Armstrong's in it, and it's a comedy, jokey kind of, and it pissed me off the way that he was, what he was doing, and the way that he was in this quote comedy about using drugs in that sport, and it just it all it did was enrage me thinking about everything that he did for him to take a part in that movie. So yeah, fuck Lance Armstrong.
Jeez, dude.
No, I'm
That's-
totally with you. And the thing is, he's got fame, millions of dollars, and for years of his life, he was living something that most people can't even comprehend.
All right, can we stop the pile on for a second?
Oh, I thought we were just getting warmed up on Lance.
Well, we might.
I got another 10 or 15 minutes.
I'm
on
sure
Armstrong.
you do. I'm sure you do. But I want to pull back a little bit because I want to give a little more context to it. And I also wanted to push back on Scott a little bit when you were saying, well, okay, in regards to sincere apologies, if they're highly motivated, which I think Lance was, he didn't necessarily feel bad because he got caught. And so the only reason why he would have even been interviewed or even apologized is because, oh, hell, he got caught. He doesn't necessarily feel bad. He just felt bad that he got caught. Am I wrong?
That's you got it. There's a little bit more to it than that, which is people that are in, for me, people that are in that kind of a position, that are that privileged,
Yeah.
that are also that duplicitous and dump on as many people on the way down. It's, again, sincere. Like
So you just question his sincerity, really?
No, I just think his character, like what he's shown me, is such a deep mental problem or character flaw or something that is like baked into him. That for me to say, oh, you're, I forgive you, we're cool. I would have to see the same kind of level of change to his character.
Okay.
Like an apology.
And an example of that was not doing that movie. Not doing that movie
Right.
would have been a good move.
Right.
You don't get a joke about it, bro.
Right. It's like the Wolf of Wall Street guy, right? He screwed over all these people, took tons of people's money, and then he's since profited off of the evil thing that he did.
Is this Bernie Madoff? I haven't seen that movie, so who's that referencing?
No, it's the guy that I forget the guy's name, but it's the guy that Leonardo DiCaprio plays in The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
Who's like a Wall Street.
It's not Madoff?
Not Madoff. No.
All right. Well, gosh dang it. I
Go ahead, Tom. Defend your boy.
I'm
Sorry,
not. I'm
am
actually
I derailing you?
No, a little bit, but I didn't. I mean, I want to kind of push pause on the sincerity apology and stuff like that because in a lot of these definitions, it is, at least in my opinion, it's very important. But as far as absolving, and that's when you brought in Lance Armstrong. I don't absolve Lance Armstrong, and I think if you were to just take his apology on Oprah, and even if you want to ignore the fact that yes, he came forward after he was caught. He's now making a publicity stunt essentially, because whether it's he's trying to regain some form of his brand or reputation or what, I don't know. I try to not read too much into it like you did, Scott. I actually just said, okay, I loved this guy forever. Okay, I'm going to try the best I can to say, okay, let's just give him a little benefit of the doubt. Let's see him come to the table, come up to Oprah, and really sincerely apologize. So I was watching way more for what he was saying, how he was saying it, body language, and stuff like that, to actually see if he was being sincere. And if you watch the interview, I don't think that he was. I mean, have you guys seen the video? Have you guys seen the interview?
Yeah.
Some of it, yeah.
Would you guys agree? Look, he looked sincere, or acted sincere, or sounded sincere.
I wasn't persuaded by it.
Yeah.
I didn't consider it binary. To me, the question isn't is it yes or no.
Okay.
I think he was doing all right. He was apologetic, but I agree with the general sentiment that it's probably not enough. One TV show appearance on Oprah, which only he could get because of the severity of his, act. So he can't just erase it from one primetime special or whatever. So I'm as cynical as the rest of you, but I still think that there's something he's trying to do to make it better. Even I would challenge Matt's position that the jokiness point of view is completely off the table. I can understand why that would be a de facto default negative in for some people, but maybe it was a fire and a miss or something. But I could see how maybe he's still struggling with it, and this is like a new way to try to remind the world that it's still him, and he's still known for having screwed up. And this that's part of the reason why it's inappropriate, because it's dismissiveness. It's dismissive of the seriousness of the offense.
Well,
and he's never done anything to indicate his remorse for the seriousness of what he did.
Are you sure?
You have to go through that in order for people to go, okay, yeah, you can joke about it now.
Are you sure he didn't?
So I agree with Matt.
I think
he's dwelling on it a lot, though. He's trying. I mean, I don't want to defend the guy too much. I'm just playing devil's advocate more than anything, because I was never as vested as Tom was. I mean, I didn't follow him that closely. I appreciated his cancer research stuff, and it seems like he's done a lot of good with the fake money he made.
Oh, jeez. Wow. You couldn't even get through with that in a nice little dig, man.
I think it's complicated. I'm trying to be more with you than with them, Tom. But
you're commendable for the effort, then.
Okay.
Well, all right. I'm going to finish these definitions real quick. So the absolve.
Wow.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 more. So the absolve one, okay, and then there's stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake. That's what I remember. Was it Glenn that said, "Well, it's not that you don't forget it, you just move on." That's what it sounds like that definition is saying. Just stop feeling.
Yeah, I thought the first one that you read addressed that pretty well, because it was like you don't wish any harm to the person who offended you.
What is harm, though? If you're seeking justice, like actual effective resolution, which is justice, right? If that's what you're seeking for, I don't think you're seeking harm.
Restoring something that you lost, regardless of any punishment to the person who offended you. I think they're distinct things.
I don't know. I don't see it as punishment or harm. I see it as just justice. If a person really wronged you and you want justice, it can be translated, or it can be sought as you're seeking harm for them. But if it's just you're seeking justice.
But if you take out their kneecaps, that's harm, maybe not justice.
Right.
Well, if they took out your kneecaps,
because they crossed you, and how dare they cross you? They're always going to be in the doghouse, and you're always going to go out of your way to remind them that they crossed you. Kind of vengeful.
Okay, but let's say someone murdered a family member of yours.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to go for capital punishment here. Sure. And so you are now determined that you want to see this person have the death penalty.
So we wouldn't feel as bad about them as we feel about Lance Armstrong. Kind of a little lower on the scale.
Yeah.
Not as big of an offense. Okay.
Not as big of an offense.
I see Scott smiling.
But I mean, you're seeking harm for that person because you want to see him ultimately dead. But at the end of the day, you really just want to see kind of an eye for eye justice, right?
In that case, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we agree.
I don't know. Justice is such a loaded word, because it assumes that whoever's enacting that or trying to is just, right? If we assume the government's going to do it justly, and that raises questions about, you bring up the death penalty, which that just spins me off into so many places as I think of the things that I've experienced.
Sure.
That I would say are unjust related to that. I mean, so man, I don't know that justice. I think justice is pretty illusory.
But even if you're seeking for it, isn't that? I mean, can't that still be under the definition of wanting forgiveness?
If who's seeking justice?
The person,
the
victim,
wronged.
the wronged, yeah.
Yeah, I think too often there's this line of vengeance in the name of justice, or at what point does it cross over? When is it? I don't know that exists, and I think it's the seeking for it and striving for justice. It sometimes obliterates forgiveness.
Well, what's the difference?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, what's the difference between justice and revenge in that context? Where's one stop and the other begin?
Well, it sounds like you're demonizing the word revenge or vengeful.
No, so let's go back to your example, Tom. So somebody's murdered somebody in your family and you're going after capital punishment. So that's the justice, they get capital punishment. But in your heart, you hope that they don't go to hell.
What are you talking about?
So they can be
Glenn, TBM whisperer.
But isn't that a case where you can have justice, but you don't really have any ill will towards the person because you've forgiven them and you said, like if Jesus can do this to the thief on the cross right next to him, then I can do this to a murderer because I'm going to follow the example of Jesus, and whether I am or not, I'm at least going to pretend that I am because that's what I should do. And so I'm going to say that, this person, I definitely want them killed because they killed my family member. But I hope the missionaries go and track them out quickly and they get converted. And I'll do their proxy baptismal work for them.
Yeah.
That would be an ensign story. There's got to be like a story of that.
Well, there might
somebody
be.
like terribly wronged them, and then they showed such forgiveness that they went and they did their temple work for them.
Well,
a story like that exists.
I do recall sharing the story in that first recording about a guy who was featured prominently on the LDS website with a video that his entire family, his wife and his kids were all killed in a drunk driving accident. And he made such a show of forgiving the drunk driver and then kind of befriended him.
Yeah.
And that was so, I don't know, it left a really bad taste in my mouth because I'm like, okay, I can appreciate that you're, turning the other cheek and forgiving the drunk driver that killed your entire family, but I it's so unrelatable. Like I don't even.
I can see that though. I mean, like,
how in the hell could you see that?
Because I'll explain it then.
Then please.
Yeah.
So nicely.
If this person has like a history of being abused and they've got a problem with alcohol and this is like they hit rock bottom and they really feel bad about what has happened and they make every effort in their life to change, I could see forgiving them for like.
Okay, but under that circumstance...
Let me tell you, one of the things that I really loved about the television show Lost, Tom.
Oh, my gosh!
The backstories. Like, you'd get somebody like Sawyer, who you think is just a total asshole, and then you find out that
that it was all made up in Michael Fox's head.
That he witnessed his dad shooting his mom and then shooting himself because they'd been conned. And, like, your heart goes out for this little kid who now is just, like, so angry, and he's on this mission to kill the real Sawyer, and then later on, spoiler alert, when he actually does, it doesn't make him feel better.
No, spoiler alert, they were all dead at the beginning.
Gentlemen, Lost was a TV show about 10 years ago that people were really into. It was cool one time.
Which recording is the old one and which one's the new one?
Yeah, really. No, but going back to your scenario, if the drunk driver was really trying to fix himself and he'd hit rock bottom, blah blah blah, I still don't think that's.
But it's not blah blah. Like, yes, I don't mean it's blah blah blah. But like if you're able to empathize with somebody's background and recognize everybody's a little bit broken, and that. I don't know. I mean, I can see it. I can see that as a viable possibility.
Well,
just not just be totally closed to it because they did this thing and your family members are dead, and so you're never going to forgive this guy.
All right, fine. I guess
I wouldn't be comfortable. Like I would be like this guy in the story that you're talking about, and try to find a way to forgive him because I don't like those feelings of.
Yeah, but then you would just. I liked your first answer better though, where you would just
Lost.
No,
yeah,
no,
Sawyer.
The one where you just move on, like befriending the guy and making it a mission of yours to be besties with the guy who killed your family.
Well, I don't know that I'd want to be besties with him, I guess, but to
I
forgive
just feel like
him. So you're right. Yeah.
a little bit of an
I was
obsession.
forgetting that part of the story.
Yeah, it's very Mormon-esque to be like, as Mormons, we don't just forgive, we forgive, plus we do.
Well, you'd introduce him to the missionaries.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of his repentance process, is joining the church. And
He's probably a member now.
yeah.
Oh man,
And then you're the one that helps him through the veil when he goes through.
dude.
Oh, man.
Turn the dial down on the whispering, man. Judas Priest.
What? I'm really riling you up, aren't I, Tom?
Well, because I can see what you're saying, but it's like, okay, that scenario is valid just because you said it. But I think that but I can totally see the other person that's like, okay, so this guy hit rock bottom, but he's also still, a drunk. He doesn't do anything better with his life, and even if he did kill your entire family, he's not trying to make things right. He's not trying to make things better. He's just a good-for-nothing drunk.
Well, yeah, that changes those variables change the way that I react.
Well, you change the variables to make it like, well, okay, so he hit rock bottom and he's trying to fix it. I'm like, okay, but there's also a guy that hit rock bottom and staying there intentionally. Like, I don't.
Well, I was only responding, Tom, where you were saying I don't understand how this could happen, and so I was trying to
Give a scenario. Okay,
some variables where it's a possibility.
All right. But even under that scenario, I'm not even sure I could do it. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I'm just thinking about all the different scenarios of different tragedies that I've seen, of professionally to a degree, where you have it's easier to say drunk driver. Now, what a single vehicle where the driver's drunk and the person that dies is a kid or a spouse or a sister or a friend or these people, whoever. And the person that's left alive is of that of the deceased, but yet the driver has a unique relationship or a different relationship, and it just gets so complicated over who deserves forgiveness and what's justice and what I don't know, man. It's just any type of these. This is a challenging one when we talk about drunk driver, I guess, for me, because nobody intends for bad things to happen, for a bad thing to happen like that. Nobody wants a death to happen versus somebody who their design is to end somebody's life. That to me is very, very different, and it's maybe less complicated in that situation. But I don't know, man. This is where I say I've had a lot of growth in trying to understand or think about how complicated it is to be somebody who does something really, really shitty that has overwhelming impact on somebody, including taking a life, man. I don't know, man.
It sounds like you're much more merciful to someone that would be a drunk driver and was, ended in a fatality, which I can understand and respect that opinion. But I mean, on the unmerciful side of things, if someone intentionally drives impaired, they know that the risks are going to be bad for them. They could much more easily hurt themselves or someone else, right? So there's still culpability there.
But Tom, using your own.
Well, this is okay. Here's un-PC me. Drinking and driving depends on the level, depends on things. I mean, there are a lot of dangerous things we do in cars. There's a lot of dangerous things that we put people at risk all the time. We don't demonize them the way we have culturally drinking and driving. So, texting and driving is probably as dangerous as drinking and driving, to depending on the degree, depending on the level.
Sure.
So I don't know, man. We give other accidents, we give other recklessness or risky behavior more of a pass than we do this one isolated thing. But knowing what I think I understand about that particular topic, it's easier for me to be merciful for those people, to those people, and recognize that that's a bad decision, like a lot of bad, risky decisions people make day in and day out that result in injury and, in some cases, death and other real tragic things. So I try to take the position of life is really, really complicated, and life is really, really hard. Try not to be as binary on those things. Thanks for that word, Bob. I appreciate that.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do more is I've spent time with some of these people and seen how it, what was it, The Crime and Punishment, was that whatever that book is about, just the racking of guilt. I've seen people go through that.
Well, I assume you've seen the other side too, right? Where the victims, the family, even the family of the victims, you've seen that pain too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so
seem that just ravaged. And one of the things that I do when I either represent victims or, if I'm talking to victims, I try to tell them that this is not the place to get healing. Is through like the criminal justice system or those things. This is another tool. This is something that does go on, but don't tie a certain result or a certain sentence to feeling like you've achieved some sort of justice. And that may not be a response to your question, but yeah, I've seen it. I've seen families on both sides absolutely destroyed by the actions of a person, and I often feel for both sides more now than I did before, as I've gotten to get to know families and offenders and people who have done things, and so it makes them more real and more Sawyer-like rather than.
Oh, come on! Don't fall in that trap, dude.
No, but it's actually a really good.
Oh, don't.
It really is.
Don't feed the bears,
really,
bro.
really
It really is pretty good. Jeez. And you start hearing, wow, this is somebody who's, their family member committed suicide when they were really little, and here's all the things that they went through, and that contributed to these things. You're like, man, this is a complicated situation, and it's really easy to dismiss a person that you see on the TV or in stripes or in court as just a piece of shit because he did this one thing. But man, if you were to videotape me at my worst moments and at some of my riskiest moments, and maybe it certainly didn't result in some of that harm, but it might be easy to call me a complete piece of shit. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by doing that and by putting people into those categories when there's a phrase we say in
Say that again.
Yeah, we're losing you.
This shoot. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
You're
a little bit.
Blythe right now, aren't you?
I'm just past Blythe, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, good one. Is that this is the only murder this person will ever commit? As if that somehow hurts you. I get it. It's like, no, it's not, but there's some meaning there. There are other people who that are worse, right? And that will continue to do bad things, but there are really good people out there, or people who have a history of either complicated life or even a good life, who had a really, really tough day. What do we do with people like that? How do we treat them?
Well, I got to admit, while I can honor what you're saying, Matt, if I was the family member of the victim that got killed, I wouldn't want to hear any of that nuanced bullshit you just said about the drunk driver. It's a complicated deal. He didn't intend to kill anybody. He just made an impaired decision. We've all done it. I would tell you to fuck off, honestly. I'd be like, but what you're saying is, well, he has pain. He has issues too. If you really want to compare, apples to oranges, like, really? Is that pain really in the same? Is it really in the same ballpark that the pain that I'm dealing with?
But no, I'm not trying to do false equivalency. And as a
it's not false equivalency.
That I don't. No. I'm saying I agree with you. You're right.
All right.
And I don't think that. I don't think that. I don't know that I would ask the victim's family to acknowledge those things as much as I would other people, because if it's your family member and you're experiencing that loss every day, it's so great. It's so.
Oh, we're losing you, dude. We're losing you. Oh man, can you guys hear him?
No.
No,
Hi,
I
Matt.
can't hear him.
Well, I want to make a point now.
All right. Go ahead.
I'll take the chance. So I have a really simple scenario for you, Tom. Based on everything you've said and your definition of forgiveness, let's use this drunk driver example, and it's a family member, and the drunk driver is killed too. So then there's just like literally no option for restitution or reconciliation. So does that mean you'll never forgive him or her? Because you can't, I mean, you'll never make reciprocal response from them because they died too.
Yeah, there's really no like target of that you can blame or focus your, I guess, revenge in some sort of justice sort of way. Yeah, it'd be like, well.
So is forgiveness in that case for you, or is it just? I mean, I'm just curious how you would approach. You would change your definition of forgiveness based on those circumstances if the other person is dead.
Yeah, the variables would be different because I think I would strive for forgiveness, but because there's no one there to like fulfill the justice that I would want or need, then I would it wouldn't feel the same. If the person was still alive, and then you could go to the courts and actually see him or her get served and whatever. I do think that would make the healing better. I've never been in that scenario, so I'm not sure. I'm just kind of playing that hypothetical in my head. But if the person was gone and dead, then I feel like that there would always be that hole that would never be filled. So,
right.
Does that make sense to all you guys? No? Okay.
Makes sense to me. I think the question is forgiveness always a virtuous thing to seek? Like, is it always necessary? Is it a net positive? In general, we talk about it in such high regard and like it's like a virtuous thing to do, but I don't know if that's that's the right way to put it on a pedestal. That's an excellent question, and that's really what I wanted to talk about too. Is the psychological benefits. A lot of religions say that in order to become more Christ-like or to achieve that divine nature, you need to forgive, get in the good graces with God, sort of thing. But even if we were to take that element out of it, do you guys think or agree that forgiveness is psychologically healthy or even emotionally healthy? Because I'm split, honestly. I'm not totally sure.
I don't think that it always is, and I also don't think that it's always necessary in order for you as the victim or someone near the victim to be able to move on. Like, if someone, like the scenarios you're talking about, if someone wasn't there to ever express remorse for something that they had done, and you're never going to be able to close that loop, you've still got to have a way to move on. Right. Yeah. So you can do that. You can feel better about things for your own sake, regardless of what anyone else does, as best as you're going to be able to, whether there's that forgiveness or not. Right. So on some level, you've got to be able to manage that, or you might find yourself in a situation where that's all you're going to get, and you're just going to have to deal with it.
So your default setting isn't like if someone wrongs you, even if it's somewhat minor. It's not, I need to find a way to resolve this and maybe even achieve forgiveness for yourself. That's not your default setting, because it is for me. And I'm thinking
like
that's
saying if I wrong someone or if someone else wrongs
someone
me?
Wrongs you. Is it like...
No, if someone wrongs me, I have to do a calculation of like, is this worth bringing up?
Depending on the person, the scenario.
I find things relatively easy to to not bring up with, like, if it's someone that's distant from me or something. There's not that many scenarios in which I find myself like demanding apologies from people.
Okay, but like your spouse, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's super important.
Yeah.
All right, I want to share something with you.
As long as it's not Lost or Spider-Man related, dude.
Especially if she's listening, it's really important.
Yeah, right. Right.
No, just kidding.
So my daughter Shaylee was telling me about a friend of hers that had kind of betrayed her. And I don't need to go into the specifics of what that was, but I asked her today, how are things going with that friend? And and basically, have you cut ties with her? Have you resolved things? And she says, yeah, I've pretty much cut ties. She still says like these passive aggressive things in this web group that we're in, but and I said, I'm sorry, that sounds like it sucks. She goes, nah, I'm over it.
Wow.
So that's not forgiveness.
So that's the question that I wanted to ask. If she says that she's over it, and she's not, like, she didn't bring it up to me. I brought it up to her because we had talked about it a while back, and she's like, yeah, it doesn't bother me anymore. I'm over it. I'm past it. Is that forgiveness? And if you go back to those definitions that you read at the start, Tom, where you're not, like, you've absolved them, like you haven't you haven't said that they didn't offend you, but you're not letting that offense affect you anymore.
Right.
You've moved on from it. Isn't that forgiveness, or a form of forgiveness?
Well, this is a good scenario because I would say in that scenario that there was no forgiveness, that all she did was supersede it. And she's moved on, because I would say if she were to physically run into this friend and then they had to do something, work on a project, or they had to interact,
like with a car, like run into her with a car. Maybe she's been drinking.
No, if they were carpooling, Dick.
Yeah.
But if they had to interact with each other, and they were forced in that situation, would Shaylee be like, yeah, this sucks? Because the tension would be really, really strong, I would imagine. Because she has moved on, like, yeah, I've cut her out of my life, I'm done with her. But if she was forced to interact with her, the tension would still be really, really strong. That's why I feel like there'd be no forgiveness. Because forgiveness would mean, if in that scenario, she could interact with her and things would be fine. That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah. I think they do interact. I mean, they interact online in a web group kind of thing. But I mean, they live close, so they do maybe see each other once in a while. But yeah, I don't know. To me, I think it is a form of forgiveness because, again, to me, forgiveness is a very personal thing, regardless of what the other person does. I mean, they can either help speed up the forgiveness process or they can make it harder to do. But it's really an individual choice that you're going to let go of whatever it is that's bothering you and not harbor any ill will towards them anymore. I think it's an internal, personal thing.
See, this is what's interesting as I've been going through this whole journey with this, is I have been thinking about it very binary or very, I don't know, like degrees instead of thinking it as a process. I don't know. Even in that scenario, I'm still thinking, well, Shaylee says she's absolved her friend or whatever, but she didn't really. She just moved the hell on. And so when you say, Glenn, that, well, I still see it as a form of forgiveness, I'm like, no, it's not. Because she just went around the forgiveness word. She just went to the back of it.
Calling my daughter a liar, Tom. That's what we're doing.
What I'm
taking her at her word.
No, what I'm
saying, no, I know better. She didn't really.
No, I love you, Shaylee. You're fine. I think what I'm saying is that the definition of forgiveness that you're using, or even just using it as like a process or a journey, is something that I'm becoming more enlightened to, and that I think that whether it has benefits or not, I don't know. But I think that
I think the important thing for me is we've been revisiting this topic in the last couple of weeks, and I've been thinking about it more. One of the sticking points is if I'm relying on somebody else to do something before I can do it, then I'm not really taking full responsibility for that action, you know. And
even if you're the
whatever
victim,
this other person does or doesn't do.
Yeah. So can I suggest something here? So maybe there's a difference between like an internal forgiveness, like within me, this is not something on my mind anymore, but externally there's a different process to go through.
That's moving on. That's not forgiveness, though, right?
I know that's what I'm saying. That's the distinction that I'm making between these two. So I think Glenn's saying he doesn't want to be reliant on somebody else, so he's able to move on,
right,
in this scenario. But I mean,
but are you,
the characteristic of that is different than an apology or forgiveness, which would, I mean, to me, involves,
if somebody's wronged me. If somebody's wronged me, do I have to tell them and say the words "I forgive you" in order to forgive them?
No.
Ooh.
No. And like in the case where the guy died and you can't do it anymore, Tom said, you said that it'd be easier for you to forgive him in that case, but he's not around anymore for you to do it. So that is a very individual. That's just you.
But remember, it's even from that first discussion, I used forgiveness like as a percentage. Like if the perpetrator or the person who wronged dies, you'll never achieve 100% forgiveness. Never. But if that person went to jail and then you can see him or her go to jail or get the death penalty or whatever it is, you get closer to 100%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I have a similar story to Shaylee's in a way. When you shared that one, Glenn, maybe it's a little more, but in my career, one of my previous jobs, I was reassigned to a manager who was kind of emotionally abusive, and he was the reason that I left the company, and I'll never want to work with him again. I don't usually dwell on it except for when it comes up in podcast conversations. But like I've moved on, but I didn't forgive him. He has no idea the damage he caused me, and nor does he even care to know. And I don't care to be in any position to try to fix anything. So I don't think forgiveness is the right approach. We don't have any shared associations like Shaylee and her friend do with a web group that they're still a part of. But I think that's just kind of leftover vestiges of a structure that's not something that she chooses to be a part of because of that other person. She'd probably just move on as well if she could, if that group wasn't important to her anymore, like I did. So,
and I think again, this is where the word forgive becomes really like it. I keep thinking of what is this a euphemism for? Like the word forgive. What does it mean in this context? And with that previous manager, forgive seems to mean that you're justifying his actions, or that you're telling him that the way that he treated you was okay, and that you're never going to say that. You're never going to say that it was okay the way that he treated you. But at the same time, the memory of that isn't damaging you anymore, and you don't dwell on it. You've totally moved on. It doesn't affect you or impact you anymore. And I would say that is forgiveness, or that's a form of forgiveness.
Wow.
Even if you don't say, oh, what you did was fine, it's okay, go ahead and do it again. But it just doesn't impact you anymore. So you're not dwelling on it. You're not harboring that. You've let it go.
Yeah, but it feels like a super low bar, because to Tom's point, if that guy was to ever cross my path again, I would like turn around and go a different direction. I have no interest in interacting with him anymore. So even though I've moved on, I haven't forgotten. I haven't changed any behavior towards him. I still think he's a dick. I never want to work with him again.
Right.
So where's the forgiveness in that?
There's no forgiveness.
Yeah, it's a really good example, because it shows how complicated it is to talk about a lot of different scenarios under one word. Forgiveness.
Yeah. It's true.
Well, and I know I talked about in the non-recorded episode, we talked about infidelity because
so every time now you talk about the non-recorded episode, I'm going to take that as I have not been forgiven for not recording that. This is still.
I apologize.
Maybe you haven't, Glenn. Maybe you haven't.
I'm not. It's not an intentional dig. I have forgiven you for that, Glenn. I have. No, but infidelity is a big issue. Even during some of my research for this and some of the articles I've read, infidelity comes up over and over and over and over again. Whether it's in therapy or not, that it seems like that one act of whether it's betrayal or hurt or however you want to describe it comes over and over and over again. Because as we've talked about, there's family members. If something were to happen to them, there's that. But if something happens to your spouse that feels like an act of betrayal like that, that's where forgiveness becomes really sticky. And I don't remember what the percentages of divorces that were with infidelity or cheating, but it's really, really high. It's like, if it's not the number one, it's number two, I think.
Well, divorce normally is often a result of marriages. So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Okay, yeah, there's that.
50-50.
But, I mean, and we talked about deal breakers as well. And deal breakers is where if someone close to you does something, commits something, or says something, where you're like, okay, you just crossed a boundary, you just crossed a line, and now I'm going to have to do something. whether it's a form of self-preservation or protection. Like in the infidelity example, if your spouse committed, cheated on you or whatever, would that be instantaneous a form of divorce? Or do you have enough room to say, okay, if we check all these boxes, like go to marriage counseling, if we do this, if you never see him or her ever again, blah blah blah, then maybe do you still have room to forgive? So that's not quite in the deal breaker category.
It feels like a trap, but I'd say for me personally, I don't consider infidelity a deal breaker by default.
By default,
I think if that were to happen to me and I would be and I'm the offendee or whatever, I'm the one impacted. I'd want to work through it and understand what happened and go through that process. I don't know that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's not look at infidelity, at least for you, Bob. Are you aware of like what would be a deal breaker? Even if it's not with your spouse, like if there's like a family member, sibling, or if they did or said something where you're like, yep, I might have to.
Matt made a comment at one point where he mentioned just lying, like people who are compulsive liars or who you really can't trust. And I have a thing with like financial abuse. What's the right word with finances? Like just with people who are just like don't even know they're bad with. Yeah, embezzlement it would be really bad for me. Just people who are really bad. Fraud, thank you.
Matt's still here.
Hey, there he is.
Yeah, man. I was listening to your deal breakers.
Awesome.
I have a thing with finances. I don't like it when people fuck around with that. But that's just me.
No, that's good. Anybody else?
Like, drugging like dozens of women and raping
here we go.
them is
From Armstrong to Cosby. Boom.
Is definitely a deal breaker.
Even if it's like your brother.
Yeah. I gotta say, if it was
like personal relationships. So I want to put some distance between my deal breaker and yours, because mine was in the context of like people close to me. Yours is like celebrities again.
No, I'm saying if anything that somebody did that just reflected them, I don't know. It's hard to communicate what I'm thinking, but like there are certain things, deal breakers, that are just so bad that you just can't ever go back from it.
Okay, so let me see if I can expound on at least the Cosby thing, because this is interesting. For all the allegations that he's been under the last couple of years, I've been a huge fan of his forever. His stand-up comedy, his shows, and all that stuff. And
the rapes, though. You're not a fan of that.
I'm not a big fan of the rapes. No.
Makes it terrifying.
But I can. Now that all the allegations are there, it's really, really difficult for me to, if the show were to come back on as a rerun, the Cosby Show, I look at it, I'm like, I can't watch it. It feels dirty. And so in a way, even, all these allegations have been a deal breaker for me. I can't listen to his comedy anymore. I kind of feel like I'm glad that I was able to get through it before all the allegations came to light, because I guess he's been doing this for decades.
So I'm interested. So sex crimes is certainly a deal breaker for me, because I always joked. It's so funny to joke about sex crimes.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Rape.
Yeah. How when it comes to like a murderer, sometimes we can understand that because everybody knows somebody that they think, I think they got it coming, but nobody thinks, I'd like to fuck a kid. So it seems really easy to say that's beyond the pale, and so things like he's doing. But I wish
you were right about that, Matt. That nobody thinks, I want to fuck a kid. That would be a nice world.
Let's just pretend like it's a reality.
Yeah.
But in the universe of normal people, I think people can get in the side of somebody who's so enraged that they'd want to either hurt or see somebody hurt or even killed. I always say everybody's got one murder in them. That something could happen enough that they'd be like, I I could pull the trigger on that. You know?
But, we're not ever going to play racquetball again.
Put another way,
Never.
they're always protecting us that are murderers.
Nobody on this call is anywhere near on my list, but
Yet.
But I was.
There's a list.
It's just comforting to know that there's a list. I think.
Yeah, it's written in purple. It's like that fat purple crayon, and I write left-handed. It's just really disturbing.
It's not like the Steve Buscemi list from Billy Madison with the
that's
lipstick.
right. That's right. Yeah, afterwards I put on the lipstick. But I read a report that that the Beatles might have been involved in these pedophile parties, at least with that there's some evidence of that. And I thought, wow, what is that? If there's truth to that, what would that do to me being able to appreciate or really enjoy and listen to the Beatles?
Sounds about right to me.
Glenn, where are you on that? You know the story that I'm talking about?
No.
Or the allegations?
No, I don't.
He's crying now. Stop it.
Getting too close to home.
Yeah. Yeah. So it definitely affects just I'll never consume anything by Michael Jackson again. He's on that list of
Really?
Michael Jackson's on the list?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
But
Fucking child
music.
molester, Michael Jackson, yeah.
Ooh, see, that's an interesting
well.
one. That's in the gray area for me.
But yeah, because
The gray area.
yeah,
I didn't mean I didn't mean it that way.
No, I mean like just convicting him because the allegations were out there, but what I don't know. I haven't thought about Michael Jackson and child molestation in a really long time. I thought that a lot of those kids came forward and recanted and stuff and said, yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, well, if you understand about if you understand recantation and the things that motivate it and why, that guy did it, bro. I feel I have enough evidence to have evaluated the evidence, I guess, to draw conclusions. So I don't need another court of law to some court to say, oh, I will make a judgment based on what this jury does or what that jury does, because none of us have a problem with O.J. done it, right? We all have enough information to say that despite that verdict, he did it. I've never understood that we will respond to what some stupid jury, what a decision a jury makes, or whether or not somebody gets actually charged with the crime or anything like that, as if that's the standard for why we're going to say, yeah, we're not going to judge that person or draw conclusions about that conduct. No, man, it's easy enough to do if you want to spend the energy to do. But I think it's lazy to give people a pass simply because there wasn't a conviction, for example. And so I don't personally do that. I try to draw conclusions based on the evidence that I have.
It sounds like you stopped liking his music. That's why.
I had to stop listening to Brandon Flowers, and all he did was just be Mormon. So,
oh, that's awesome.
No, but Matt, you
even have a tough time with Johnny Depp. So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I do with Johnny Depp as well.
I don't personally subscribe to an innocent until proven guilty ideology. I subscribe to that if I'm on a jury. I subscribe to that if I have to make that decision in a court of law. I do agree with the principle, but not just in daily life. So there were, and a lot of it is because I have never had to go through a jury trial to understand whether or not somebody was factually guilty. And to me, being factually guilty matters more than being legally guilty. And there's too many situations where people should not be found guilty, legally guilty, because of due process violations or police work or other things, these quote-unquote technicalities. Well, the Constitution is not a technicality, and I believe that very strongly. I've always believed that. So legal guilt is irrelevant to me. I care more about factual what is, I guess, factual guilt or factual innocence. And so I don't need to hold, wait until there's been some judgment or some certain standard. At some point, I have my own, I make decisions based on my standards of truth and credibility and evidence and all those things to make a judgment call. And I think too often we adopt, as a society, we adopt this really pretty messed up and ineffective court of law standard of innocent until proven guilty. But it's different than when you're saying we're going to take away that person's liberty versus, that person's reputation problem. There's enough there to take away that person's reputation. That's different than taking away their liberty. And so my standard of proof is going to be different for that, to draw judgment based on that, than if I'm putting them in jail versus, finding a conviction, taking away their rights versus, wanting to put a needle in their arm. I mean, there's just these standards, and too often we have this one-size-fits-one approach of what that means, and most times people get it wrong anyway. So, no, man, I'm not going to start with a presumption of innocence, whatever that means. I'm going to start neutrally, and then based on, once I start hearing evidence, I'm going to start drawing conclusions. And if we're honest with ourselves, I think we all do that. We take a piece of evidence and then we put it in that column and we start pushing this way. We start drawing conclusions. And maybe it's not enough to say, okay, I'm open to enough evidence to change my position. But then at some point you say, yeah, it just doesn't matter what comes in now. I've drawn conclusions. This guy's a child molester. This guy's whatever. Michael Jackson's a child molester. There's no question about that. I don't need additional evidence or somebody else to find him guilty, posthumously or otherwise, to draw those conclusions. There's enough. There's enough evidence on OJ and other people. And that's why when I don't always do that. When a news article comes forward and somebody's been accused, I don't just jump to, oh, he's guilty, this should happen. I try to find information first and find what the evidence is, and not just what's the legally admissible evidence, but what actually happened, and then weigh it from there. So fuck reputation, man. I'm not gonna. Let's not take away their reputation. No, if they've probably done things that justify that reputation being taken. Woody Allen's no, fuck that guy.
They probably have done things, dude. They probably have. You spent this whole.
You don't have the advantage of watching Tom's face as you're going on about like the criminal justice system when he wants to talk about forgiveness.
Tom, stop it. I'm saying probable. I'm not saying. Well, give me a specific situation, and I'll talk concretely. I'm saying in most situations, if I'm drawing conclusions, there are reasons why. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier. And it's a lot easier to do that when it's someone that's, if it's someone close to you or someone that's not close to you, you can approach it in a totally different way. I mean, people have very motivated reasoning in how they things like we're talking about infidelity and that sort of thing, and if people feel like they have a really good marriage otherwise, that's often something that they can get through. If people have a lot of issues, then a lot of times that's going to be a deal breaker for them. So it really affects how people are able to cope with that sense of betrayal based on what they want that long-term emotional connection to be. But I think, like, to your point, or to your earlier point about people lying over and over and over, I don't think that people take credibility into play enough. Like, I don't think that most. I wish that more people would pay more attention to what people's credibility is, because I think there's a big variance between people that are trustworthy and people at the other end of the spectrum. There's a lot of people that, like, I can't believe that the media even takes the president as seriously as he does. Or somebody like Lance Armstrong, after years and years and years of.
I love how you sidestepped upsetting Tom by calling him the president, and then you saw his reaction and went, "Okay, let's go to Lance Armstrong."
No, I'm saying what happened with Lance Armstrong. Like, so that is very different than say like what's going on with Bill Cosby, right? Because even though he's been accused of it, and well, maybe it's not that different, but so Lance Armstrong for years has been under a magnifying glass, right? He's been in the spotlight about
trying to
this.
find that testicle. I'm sorry.
And
I'm going on mute.
And he went for so long, lie after lie after lie, it make it more and more elaborate the whole way, to where it's like after that, the credibility factor on him is like 10%. So whatever else happens in that scenario, it's gonna be a real tough uphill battle for him.
Nice numbers. I love it.
Thought you'd like that, Bob. It's my that's my Lance Armstrong cred scale.
Cred scale for
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and the other guy that comes to mind when we're talking about this is the guy who wrote 3 Cups of Tea. It was supposedly this hiker that came.
Oh yeah, you said the Krakauer wrote it.
Yeah, so Krakauer ended up writing a book about this guy called 3 Cups of Deceit, and Krakauer was so pissed off about the thing because he had personally donated tons of money to this guy and was like a huge supporter of this organization that he set up to put schools in Pakistan and Afghanistan, places where they just didn't have any schools, and they were supposedly educating, girls in villages and stuff. And a little bit of it was kind of sort of true, but his whole, like the whole book that he wrote was complete bullshit. And then most of his organization after that was just to defraud people. So somebody like that, I just see no redemption for, like, on so many levels. Like, they're not going to be credible. They're not going to be able to be sincere about where they're coming from.
So even
it shows like deep, horrible character flaws that like a normal person just wouldn't ever do. Like good people get caught up in bad things. That happens. But on that level, on that scale, like to write a book that's just a total fabrication and put it out as this really happened, that's somebody who's got a
sociopathic, right?
Yeah. They're a sociopath, or there's some chemical imbalance, or there's something that's going on there that would, in my mind, preclude being able to say, okay, you're forgiven for that.
See, I guess even in that scenario, if whoever that person was were to offer even under your standards, Scott, a sincere apology, like not motivated by the press, kind of went around, even tried to raise funds to recoup all the losses and all that stuff, you'd be like, fuck no, dude, deal breaker, you're done. Right?
It depends. I mean, it's all sliding scale. There, I could see someone getting there, but I'm just saying it's so much harder than a different scenario.
Hi, this is James from Utah, and I like to listen to Infants on Thrones as I walk to class so I don't go crazy thinking about how I'm still at BYU. You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com, and if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
Tom, what's your vision for putting all of this together?
I'm actually it's been kind of a self-exploration for me through all this, because it's interacting with you guys, interacting with other people. I've started to understand that I don't know if it's short-sightedness that I've had in my definition of forgiveness, and also with apologies and whatever, and demanding, or even having like this inner desire or need that I need the offender. Yeah, like I have this requirement that they need to apologize, and they also need to check these boxes of being sincere and approaching me and actually saying the words "I'm sorry" instead of like, "Hey, dude, so that was kind of shitty. Anyways, I'll see you next week." And I'm like, no, that doesn't qualify. No, that doesn't qualify. And so I've understood that it's pretty messed up the way I look at it, and I've been trying to either fix it or come to terms with it, because it's been really, really damaging on my life and my immediate family and friendships. And
did it come from Mormonism at all, or do you think it's?
I think there's a degree that comes from Mormonism, but I also think that there's a degree of kind of family culture. I know that I've mentioned this before, but my father, he holds grudges like no one I've ever seen, and you know, his older brother passed away, and my dad didn't want to go to the funeral, and then my mom took him to the funeral kicking and screaming, and during the funeral, where he's up in the front in the reserved family area, he got up and made a big scene because he had had enough of all these people getting up there at the podium and just spouting lies about how good of a guy he was. He just couldn't.
Washing his brother's balls.
Yeah, exactly. Going to the sink and washing this guy's balls from the podium is bullshit. And so my dad had to make the scene and left, and then refused to go back in, and lots of ill will and bad feelings all the way around. And I started to notice that whether it was like something that was taught or I just picked up on or what, but I kind of have like those little feelings. And I think it's kind of justice filled, actually. I feel like if you're wronged and you don't get that sense of justice or equality that feels satisfactory, then you're like, fuck that, and I'm going to hold a grudge for who knows how long.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys get that? You guys don't have
totally
that issue?
I totally get
Totally.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Because
But I really did used to be like that type of a guy. My family does have some of that in us. Like my grandmother was like that. My aunt, like her sister, did the same thing as your dad. My aunt to my other aunt. So yeah, I totally get that, and have tried to slay those demons myself. I think I've been able to successfully.
But I guess
that, but I totally understand.
I guess that's my question, though. Are they demons, Matt, or is it just? Is there something? It's not necessarily nefarious. It's just something. You know, I don't necessarily. I mean, for a long time, I looked at my dad as like, oh, you know, he's being swayed by Satan by holding this grudge, and it's gonna, you know, he's gonna have to pay for that in the afterlife or whatever. He goes to the judgment of God, and Christ will be like, remember that turn the other cheek thing I taught? You never once used it. You had to you had to sit there and hold grudges. It's like you didn't even read any of the words I put in that Bible or whatever. And I don't know, now I look at it and I'm like, my dad just has a really heightened sense of justice. Like when he's wronged, he wants that wrong to be right, one way or another. That's what he really, really needs. It's super important.
Sometimes you want to tell people like that, like, dude, it was just a burnt pot roast this time.
Right?
You know, like,
no, you're totally right. Sometimes it's
people,
petty. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's this muddy spectrum of things. You know,
where did the burnt pot roast come from? That was awesome, but it was kind of random.
I don't know. It just popped in my head.
It was random.
I like that.
I liked it.
I wonder where that came from in the recesses of Bob's mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Worst thing about growing up Mormon, the bad casserole.
We had a really bad family home evening based on a burnt pot roast, I guess. No, but I was just going to say, piggybacking on that, I feel like most of the conversation we had was like taking like the top 3 or 4 worst offensive things any human could do, and then being like, how do we deal with forgiveness in this case? Which, like, most of us will experience that, like, you know, if we're lucky, only a handful of times, and it's a friend, and it's never to us. But then we didn't really get into the nitty gritty of like forgiveness of the day to day, like, stupid shit that where you don't even know if the forgiver, if you guys are on the same page, if there's an offense and then the offender is more offended than the offendee because then they're making too big of a deal out of it. And there's just like, there's like the practical forgiveness that's like the everyday stuff. Like, how do you just make sure like stuff rolls off your back? And then there's yeah.
Well, I was going to go ahead, man.
Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just going to say, if you really want to see a scenario like this play out, and I saw this just recently because my grandmother passed away on my mom's side, all of the property and the inheritance and all of the items of value, to see how that gets divvied up.
Oh, no.
That's when you really start to see people's true colors. And I'm sure everybody's seen this, or if you haven't, you will. That's when people, whether it's petty or not, but bad feelings start coming up. People will be offended one way or another. bad vibes, bad feelings, grudges, all that stuff shakes out, and a lot of family relationships will probably be terminated of it. I just saw it with my mom's family, where now there's 2 or 3 sisters that no longer speak because they didn't get the RV or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's where the contested probate cases are worse than.
Oh yeah,
custody cases.
You get a front row seat to some of that stuff.
Oh yeah, they're really, really, really hard. They're cases that go on usually for years, and if they're fighting over that much stuff, it means there's probably money.
Yeah,
and if people don't have their estate done properly, there's usually problems with mismanaging it, or people getting promised things, and everyone feels cheated. Like there's no. Yeah, and especially if it's blended family at all, like if it was a second marriage or anything like that, that's even worse.
Oh, sure.
So, yeah, there's
you don't walk into a situation like that and be like, all right, who's the raper? Who do we blame? It's like, there's no clear-cut answer. And so it's just this giant mess of everybody feeling like they've been wronged and they deserve forgiveness. Well, and they're not going to get any of that stuff that you talked about, Tom, of like the other person admitting that they were the wrongdoer. Well,
and it's like, well, you're just a half brother comes out, or it's like you didn't spend enough time with grandma like I did, just it's bad.
And then it's like, which one is the worst offense? The first person who started it or the person who escalates it? It's just like a festering wound that everybody contributes to, and then nobody knows who to even forgive in the right context or way because it's just all over the place. But Matt, you were going to say something. I want to hear your thoughts.
I forgot.
That might be a blessing in disguise, bro.
That's not nice.
No.
But you forgive him.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't hold a grudge.
All right, I forgive you. Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. This day-to-day wrongs. I just am imagining this. Somebody who's constantly looking like, who is wronging me today? Where must they make offense? And I wonder if that happens more often. I hope not. That it's just people assume the best, especially when it comes to. I'm thinking of the people that I care about and the people that I want in my life, from my kids to my wife, friends that I interact with daily, is to not assume that there's a slight where no slight is intended, and assuming the best in people, and especially of your friends, of strangers or people you don't really like otherwise. I get doing that, but hopefully most of the people that I'm interacting in my life, from my coworkers to everyone else, is just I do think there's something to be said with that. Choose to be offended. Sometimes you look for something and saying, well, that was a wrong, or that person meant that, and attributing malintent happens too often, when most times they're certainly not meaning that, or not meaning to even say what you think they're saying, and it's a misperception. So I don't know. Sometimes it feels like we're looking to be offended and looking to be victims and be wronged, when it's rare that that's really what the person is doing. So this is where I come back to just, if you feel you need to give grace, and especially on the small things, that's just like an easy thing to do. I brought up the book the other day of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. A lot of that is, what are you going to give a fuck about? Like, so-and-so said this, and how much time are you going to spend thinking, what does that mean? And why did they say it that way? Did they mean this? And were they referring to this thing that happened to you? I think they referred to that. Fuck that guy. If he's still thinking about that, and he made a line about, how people get spun out, and when that's not the case. So this topic keeps bringing that up, is how many people have really wronged me? I guess if I went through it, I could find instances of that, but by and large, it requires, it's a pretty high threshold for me to say, yeah, that person done me wrong. I don't know. What do you guys have that same? I feel like Bob's kind of he's got
Uh-oh.
stars by people's names. Like he's like got his list of, you know, of, here's the ledger of where I've been wronged. And
I don't think Bob's like that. Do you think you're like that, Bob?
No, well, let me elaborate because I don't think I'm like that, but I think I am something.
Well, you're definitely something.
So I don't want this to come across defensively, but I think this ties into another topic about forgiveness that I sometimes feel myself preoccupied with, which is, you know, what do people feel about me? Because I feel like whenever there's a conflict at work or in my relationship or on this podcast, no,
I know that was the one that you were first thinking of, but you made
and
it
then I said a third.
Yeah.
Damn it, Glenn.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to say that people remember, like, there's just like a long history of every little thing that bugs you about a person, and people don't forget that. And so, like, you know, you guys are familiar with the concept of the emotional bank account, where you can only withdraw so many times or be yourself in a certain way so many times before people say cut that out, or I'm annoyed at you, and then hold it against you. So there's this long history of people who you're close to having all sorts of preconceived baggage with you whenever they're annoyed with you, because all that happens is this huge laundry list of every annoyance that they've had with you in the past comes up. And I feel like we all do it, but we don't admit it to ourselves. We all interact with each other based on how we've built up that person's persona from the last 5 times we interacted with them. And it's kind of in the context of a good or bad. I guess here we're talking more bad. So if you're annoyed with somebody, sometimes you're less annoyed with who they are in the moment and what they're doing in the moment, but it just brings up the last 5 things that annoyed you about them because you didn't quite get the resolution or the quote unquote forgiveness for those petty things or whatever from the last 5 things that were similar to this one. And so I think about it from the perspective of like, oh, if I bring something up, or if somebody's annoyed at me, then I think like, oh, well, you know, how is this relationship with this person? Is it really something where we can work through this in the moment, or is this just a placeholder for the last 10 times, you know, they've been annoyed at me? Be it Glenn or my wife, or see there, Glenn, I did it first.
Okay.
Or my brother or my sister or my parents. I don't know. I feel like this is probably way off topic for you, Tom. Sorry, but I'm just trying to answer Matt's question. You can ut this out.
No, go ahead.
I want to reference a really shitty movie, which is it's a Dream a Little Dream with the Coreys, Corey Haim and Corey Feldman.
Then there's no way it could be bad.
It's Jason Robards, and it's kind of one of those Freaky Friday.
Okay, stop talking about the movie. Get to your point, man.
Okay. So there's a scene in it where this older guy is dealing in high school, basically, and he's talking with this character's enemy. And he's like, dude, in 20 years, I'm not even going to remember if I was friends with that guy or if I was, you know, I'm just going to assume we were friends. I mean, we're kind of friends, right? He's telling his enemy, you know, that they're in high school, that in 20 years he's not going to give a crap. And I feel like that. Like, I've come across people or see people, and I get a little self-conscious because I think, boy, I think we were friends, but what if they look at me as being the person that wronged them?
Yeah.
But I don't hold that. Like, I really don't have a very long memory with most people when it comes to wrongs. And so I had a situation recently where a kid from high school works with my brother. My brother brought up and said, hey, you know so-and-so. I was like, yeah, I think that, he played soccer, and yeah, he was a good dude. He's like, yeah, he said you were an asshole. And I was like, oh, I was really hurt. And I was like, what did I do? What was our interactions like for him to still hold on to that, to have a negative feeling about me? And I felt really bad. And I would have liked to go and apologize and for whatever it is. He said I was a bully, which I thought was kind of weird because I don't think I was a bully then. But
wow.
Clearly I did something for him to feel that way. And
Did you say then I wasn't a bully then?
I didn't think I was. Am I a bully? Glenn? Is that what you're saying?
I can see why people would feel intimidated by you, Matt.
So that's a yes.
I don't think that means that you're a bully, but I think I can understand why people would think that you, like Bill Reel might think that you're a bully. People who listen to that podcast might think that you're a bully, or were in that case.
Whatever.
only idiots.
Yeah, only dumb people.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
Stupid people.
but I will say, going along the point there, I've actually made a very conservative effort to let people know when they've hurt my feelings. That took a long time for me to come around to that because I've internalized most of it. Like if someone pisses me off, I'm like, what a dick that guy was being, or whatever, and then I never address it. It's like I hold this like one-sided grudge. You know, it's like Matt comes up to me and says something, I'm like, what a freaking bully and a dick. And then I don't say anything forever. Well, honestly, if I really want to get over it, I need to at least give that person a chance. Like this was about a few months ago. This guy was back-talking me or whatever, just spreading just bullshit nonsense behind my back. And I went right up to him. I said, hey, if you got a problem with me, I'm right here. Say it all you want, right here, right now. And he, of course...
And I appreciated you saying that, Tom. And I thought that we resolved it. And I'm really upset that you're bringing it up right now.
And I even brought some witnesses just in case you want to mischaracterize me again. But when I did that, he was very off put at first, but he quickly said, "Oh yeah, all right, sorry about that." And then he apologized, and we're totally cool now. And I started to realize that even not being on the offended side of things, I still need to let people know, because there's a lot of times that I get hurt that they didn't mean to, and so I need to at least give them the chance to at least know if they didn't. Now, if they're just being dicks and they're like, "Oh yeah, I meant to hurt you," so yeah, I did hurt you, and I'm not sorry for it. So go, kick rocks or whatever. There are those people, but I think that's pretty minor. But but most of the time when I say, hey, what you said there really hurt me, most times they're tripping over themselves saying, I'm sorry. I seriously didn't mean to do that, or I didn't mean for you to get hurt or whatever. And so real healing happens that way. So anyway, that good?
Yeah.
We've been doing this for 5 years, and we've had our run-ins. Never anything too serious, but we've had our run-ins, and I'm really proud that we're friends, and I feel like when we come across these issues, a lot of times it happens in emails, like emails going back and forth. But I feel like if you went back and you read our email exchanges from 5 years ago, and you read them from like 2 weeks ago, or something, that you would see that as a group of friends, we've learned from each other how to, whether it's what you're saying, Tom, to let you know that this is bothering me, but to not do it in a snarky way that's going to push other buttons that sends people, like we've learned how to do that with each other, I think, better. And that like none of us have ever been so offended by anything that we've done to each other that we've said, okay, that's it, I'm done.
Well, there's been some times, you're 100% right, but there were some times that I got a little nervous, that it seemed like there were some feelings getting super hot that I didn't think that we could come down from that peak.
There have been some times, yes.
But Glenn, what you bring up is exactly the category of forgiveness that I always find myself in the middle, not always, but I seem to find myself in the middle of, where somebody does something, and then I respond by pointing it out in a snarky way. Let's use that word. And then all of a sudden, it becomes more about the offense of my snarkiness and less about the thing I was pointing out. And then it's just a spiraling cycle of who's the offender or the offendee, if now it's all muddy because the person who was offended originally just escalated it. And then it's their fault now because they're the escalator. And that's a worse offense than whatever the person did at the beginning. And that's just something that I can admit that maybe I struggle with, or that I think about, because sometimes when something bothers me, snarkiness is a natural response. But then I've been trying to learn that that's not necessarily the the way to address it properly. So
Yeah, but
So you're saying when you winky face, you don't mean the winky face? Is
gosh,
that what you're saying?
that winky face thing.
The winky
ruined it
face
for
doesn't
everyone.
really diffuse everything that you're intending it to diffuse.
No,
I think you're an asshole. Wink.
but now you guys get to use it with the free pass because I instituted it as a thing that I can't use, but you can use. You see?
You see how you did it? Yeah, right. No, I have to commend you, Bob, that it seems like to me that when things do get heated, you've always come kind of off that hill and say, all right, let's get level-headed about this, and I'll concede some things, and let's get on the same playing field. I have to commend you for that, but I also want to commend Matt, because I know sometimes he comes in with his hammer swinging, and he gets really hot sometimes, but without fail.
We call it the bully hammer.
The bully hammer.
Oh, no.
But without fail, and I mean this, dude. This is super sincere. Like, I am so impressed that Matt has, every time that I've seen, and I know he's done this in private, so I've only got some hearsay, but he's been really apologetic and really tried to make the wrongs right. So it's been a big example to me anyway. So there you go.
Yeah, I run white hot, and then I like Randy. He gets worked up and then really feels bad afterwards. So he and I have a similar approach when it comes to that. We feel very, very largely both sometimes negatively and positively. But so my wife Chris and I had a conversation about forgiveness this weekend, and I'm sure our conversation prompted it. But and it relates to Bob, kind of what you were saying about maybe that emotional, credit bank account or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things we've found ourselves doing recently, especially when we're just in a really good place together, when we're in a really good, we're just kind of grooving, and really understand each other and feeling empathy and whatnot, is we've actually brought up bad situations in the past and kind of highlighted them again. And what it's done for us is find real healing and forgiveness, is being able to actually hold that up and say, yeah, that was a bad time and this happened, but I don't feel negatively towards you anymore. That really doesn't exist. I mean, it exists and it happens, and I want to acknowledge it, but in acknowledging it, there's almost even more growth and more, I guess, love and empathy, because even though that exists and even though I remember it and it will never not be remembered, it's the effect of it isn't there anymore. And there's even more affection and empathy and love and all those things because of that. And so we really identified that this weekend. And in our conversation that wasn't recorded by, I don't remember who didn't record it, but it really kind of helped kind of spawn that realization of even the memory of it can actually turn to being something even more positive than if we hadn't maybe gone through that. And that's where I come to the concept of grace. There is really grace that exists there. Is, even though this happened, it's what would you say? Not even it's not that it's not a negative, but it now can even be a positive, something that we built on, that we've treated as almost a foothold to climb up on our relationship.
Yeah, I really like that, and I want that to be the way that you're describing it with more people in my life. Then I think it's no accident that it's you two have a super close and strong and healthy relationship, and so that there's room for that to be part of your exploration of reanalyzing negatives in the past. But I think my takeaway is maybe I need to do that more, or we all do in a way, with more than just like the immediate people around us. Because I feel like the default way, the flip side of that coin, Matt, is that if you don't do that, then even if you think you've moved on from something, you still remember all of the shitty things that people have done to you. Maybe not like in a, fold up a piece of paper and keep a jar of them or any sort of weird way like that. But like, I'm always conscious of this lingering trail of the negative Bob that everyone knows me as, who knows me well enough to have seen that, but doesn't know me well enough to do what you just said you did with your wife. So it's still not entirely a thing that is a positive by default. I think it's something we all need to work at.
Yeah, no, and it's a good point. It makes it easier to do that with the person that you're going to put your part in. That makes it a little easier to do that. But the more intimate the relationship, the easier I hope that would be to do. But I always keep coming back to empathy and really trying to have empathy for the people whose relationships matter, and that includes the friends and people, the podcast, family members. So it's a smaller group, and everyone else, I guess, be damned. I don't know.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.